continues their domination. But coming up next, Muzzy versus JasonZhou, a rematch from Thursday, the first day of the World Championship. Who's going to be the next player that's going on to the quarterfinals? And this is a little bit of a recap, Admirable, of that match that I just mentioned from Thursday in that Group B play.
Yeah, a lot of the play from JasonZhou, I feel like Tempo Rogue might be what weak point in his lineup, just given his navigation with the deck. A lot of times in the matchups where he needs to be pushing damage, we didn't see him doing that. We saw him taking some favorable trades, and not really much of a surprise. He, in his days when he was cutting his teeth on competitive Hearthstone, Control Warrior was his bread and butter. Taking favorable trades is, I think, a big point of his gameplay, and I think that's something that Muzzy can punish, and rightfully so. It's one of the best mechanical players in the world, and I think JasonZhou has to tighten up his play, and hopefully for him, he has something planned for this match.
Yeah, and we saw him backstage a little bit, and one thing is JasonZhou used to actually play on the America servers a bunch. A few years back before he moved to China, and he said he used to play against Muzzy a lot on ladder, and now kind of fitting that they're both playing against each other at least a few times in the World Championship. But it's about time to get the match underway, so introducing our first player, representing the Americas, it's Muzzy.
Two-time leader in HCT points. This big stage, though, is the one that's yet to be entered.
And his opponent, representing China, it's JasonZhou.
Speaking of twice, his second World Championship appearance, one of the last hopes for China to win a championship.
Decider match number 2, Muzzy versus JasonZhou.
When I go to every tournament, I prepare for the first and I prepare for the last. So the only thing I can do is do my best to prepare for the tournament, then try to win the tournament.
I think this is the strongest field that has ever been assembled. I don't think it's even close to like any other tournament. The person who's going to win Worlds is going to get to say that they won Worlds out of this entire field.
Muzzy versus JasonZhou. Ready, set, go!
Elimination day continues. Muzzy versus JasonZhou. One player is going to be sent home after this series. Sol, who's it going to be?
It's a really tough one to call. I think both of these players have an incredible pedigree behind them. Both of these players perhaps underperformed the first time we saw them. Muzzy had some questionable decisions with his Priest play against the Warlock, I believe it was. I think Admirable summed up some of Jason's problems earlier, just over-trading, playing a bit too passive in a few spots. So my answer to that question will be whoever elevates their play to the next level in this series.
Yeah, let's take a look at the classes. Q-Block banned out by, or Muzzy's Q-Block banned out, should I say, and the Highlander Priest banned out from JasonZhou. It has kind of surprised me overall the way the bans are a bit wider than I thought they would be, to be completely honest. It's been a lot of Warlock and Priest, of course, but in those situations, you know, there's been a lot of questions is it going to be Warlock or Priest in this match?
Yeah, I think fairly clear when you look at the lineups with the data that we are being provided by HS Replay. Jason has 3 unfavorables against Muzzy's Warlock, Muzzy pretty much the vice versa with the Priest, so it's a pretty clear ban strategy in this matchup, but we are ready to get into game number 1. Remember, everything on the line. Every game you see from here on out will send one player home. Not feeling 100% happy with their performance, because as we discussed, all of these players, it's win or nothing, essentially. No matter what they say, their motivation is that they are here to win.
Yeah, 100%. I think looking back after the tournament, you could say, oh, you know, top 4 was decent, of course. It's more than decent to us, of course, but to them. While you're in the tournament, you're there to win. There's no messing about. Muzzy, no messing about either with this opening hand. He did keep Raza Priest. He kept Raza Priest. He kept Raza in Priest in the mulligan. Was Raza going to go through there? So he's off to a pretty reasonable start, but JasonZhou does have a good open himself as well.
Yeah,
especially with that corridor paper.
Snap Mark of Yasharaj here on the Raven. This is what you want to be doing against Priest. You know, building a board full of 1/2s is not going to be too effective. Priest has a lot of game against that. They can just do spell damage, Spirit Lash, they can jam while Pyromancer clears, all that kind of stuff. could shut down those early boards, but just making a 4-4 on turn 2 and hitting you with it, Priest struggles with that enormously.
Yeah, and especially one of the minions being the Raven, because it has 2 attack, then suddenly Potion of Madness is actually a bit of a problem in terms of getting even stronger value trades, as opposed to, you know, Fireflies beating each other up.
Right.
Okay, you know, whatever. Thanos is going to be traded away again. Card draw is the key. And the 2 keys to this 1 lock are in Muzzy's hand now, the Raza and the Anduin. But he still has to stave off the aggression for long enough for those to even be relevant at this point. We've seen a few spots so far in this tournament where Raza's been skipped over on turn 5 to try and, you know, be a bit more defensive, and then Raza can come a little bit later. This is a hell of a board from JasonZhou.
Dragonfire available on 6 now for Muzzy, but the Pyro clear is not going to be effective. Will only take care of the patches with the mana and spells that he has available. JasonZhou does have this ability to just start chaining buffs. He's already jammed 1 Mark of the Lotus, has a Savage Roar to back it up, and he has a Corridor Creeper that's going to be available to hit the board next turn with this patches going down to the Pyro.
Yeah, I think this is nice play, though, from Muzzy, because although you said, you know, the Pyromancer doesn't get the job done completely, it softens the minions up, that if they receive any more buffs, well, worst, Muzzy can Raza on 5, take a big push of damage, and then Dragonfire to clear off and keep with those free heals going forward. It's whether JasonZhou just does too much damage during the next 2 turns.
Now that I look at this board state, I would love to see Jason Savage Roar right now. It's a really difficult call to make. If he Savage Roars, he takes care of the Pyromancer with his face attack, and then he pushes, what is it, 13 more, leaving Muzzy at 8. So if you expect your opponent to drop Raza, which you do, there's a kept card that's not been played yet.
There we
he
go.
He then heals, takes himself back up to 10, and JasonZhou then has the damage on board to punish that Raza play with lethal. This is great recognition from Jason. It's one thing for me to call it out. I see the hands. I see how this is going to play out. Jason recognizing it and executing it is on a much higher level.
That's it. You can see what Muzzy was going to do with his hand, right? You know, we can see, and that was obvious. But that did leave a window of opportunity there, and JasonZhou's kind of just pushed the window that little bit wider open. And as he said, this leads Muzzy to not be able to play Raza on 5. Exactly. And then you imagine he probably isn't going to play it next turn either. So then suddenly Raza on 7. Much less impactful in the game in the long term when you start adding up those heals.
Oh, baby, that bitter Tide Hydra. He had a Corridor Creeper to come down, but that would have walked into the Dragonfire Potion. The 8/8 after seeing the single copy of Shadow Word Death getting used already. I think that's the checkmate card right there.
You have bested.
It is. You have bested me. A very quick game there, kicking off. JasonZhou taking the win. And as you love to say, Sol, Hydra is like Scalebane. It survives the Dragonfire Potion and already has the buff on itself.
Yep, and unlike Scalebane, it hits you for 8 after the Dragonfire Potion survival, not just 5. It's a huge difference. It's a card I'm a huge fan of. I think it's a fantastic choice. You saw it there from JasonZhou.
Yeah, this is Elimination Day, an elimination match for these 2 players. Who's going to take it? Find out after this.
The quest for Hearthstone's greatest prize continues when the Hearthstone World Championship returns.
I'm Muzzy. I'm from Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, and I play Hearthstone professionally for Tempo Storm. Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania is pretty nice. It's pretty quiet. Not much happens here, and that's kind of like that. I sort of balance both school and Hearthstone. I recently switched my major to game and simulation development. You know, Hearthstone sort of opened my eyes into this other career field. You know, maybe I would enjoy making games too, you know, for a career. What motivates me the most, I think it's just being the best. I guess it's just sort of a sense of accomplishment for me to feel like I'm the best and know I'm the best and prove it. I think that's really what makes me play Hearthstone so much. My mentality going into Worlds, a sense of, oh, I'm gonna fail. There's nothing I can do about the fact that I'm gonna fail. So I'll just keep playing and we'll see if this failure comes or if I'm going to succeed. I've had one of the best years in Hearthstone to date so far. 2 years in a row I've been the leader in points for last call, and this year I have tournament results to back it up. So hopefully at Worlds this year I could say that I'm a world champion now. If I win the world championship, I will finally have become legendary.
Prize everyone is here for, the Hearthstone World Championship trophy and everything it represents. JasonZhou is 1-0 up, and it would be absolutely amazing for him to be China's first ever Hearthstone World Champion.
Hearthstone is very popular in China. A lot of young people, they like this game, and they want the Chinese player to win.
Please join me in welcoming from China, JasonZhou!
I went to BlizzCon last year and I got the top 4, but I make some mistakes.
JasonZhou, China's last hope, looks like he's going down here.
This year I really want to go back and maybe to see if I can get the champion title.
Here we go. JasonZhou is the 1-0 up, is the leader, but Muzzy is by no means done. There's still a lot of this series to be played out right now.
That was really great play, game 1 from JasonZhou, though. He understood everything about the matchup. He understands that you need to chain buffs against these control decks and just prevent your minions from ever being taken off the board. You can see that, Muzzy killed 2 minions that entire game, and Jason was just able to compound damage. That Savage Roar timing was just perfect, being able to force through the damage and set up the lethal. We said early on, Jason looks like sometimes he's a little bit out of his element when he comes away from his control routes and has to play these aggro decks instead, but that was a much, much better game for him.
But you almost said set up La Lethal, then I was like, is this a new phrase knocking around that I've not heard yet?
No.
JasonZhou is going to be on the Rogue, Muzzy locking in the Priest again. What do you make of this Dragon Highlander versus normal? I call it normal Highlander, draw Highlander, I might call it.
I mean, for me, the standard list is just so powerful, so consistent, and so refined at this point. It's had so much work put into what the individual cards and tech choices are, that to me it's still arguably the most powerful deck in the game. Even though people are starting to move that title towards Warlock, I still think Raza Priest perhaps is better in some matchups in the hands of the best players than people even give it credit for. The Dragon version is still a little bit unrefined for me. We've had this discussion pretty much all week of the different builds, and for example, Doc Hone.
Alexstrasza versus Scalebait.
Right, not really knowing what the last dragon that he needs to fill out his list is and going with Alexstrasza in the end. So, maybe there is long-term potential in the deck, and it's certainly the security of just having the card Duskbreaker in your deck against the aggro builds is a huge reason why you want to run this, but for me, I'm sticking with classic Raza Anduin, Highlander Priest all the way.
Always a sucker for the classics.
Yeah.
And a significantly lower power turn JasonZhou would have wanted there, as the patches is indeed in the hand. So just a 3-3 from that turn, but still a 3-3 that Muzzy can't really deal with that well. So it's just going to be a pass for now. Holding on to that coin when you're rocking cards like Scalebane, Operative, Geist, for example. Really want to hold on to that to the more impactful turns where you can chain threats as opposed to maybe just, you know, get half a threat out with the coin and then have a dull turn the turn after.
This is a really clunky draw for the Rogue. The Rogue can go later against Priest than some people might suspect, but you do really need to run through early pressure to get that job done. It's your mid-game and late-game threats that will do most of the work if you sequence them correctly, but you still need to have early pressure to siphon some removal away from your opponent before you start dropping those bigger threats later in the game. If you just give Muzzy all the time in the world to set up, then yeah, he can just hold on to that coin. He can start dropping his big threats quicker. He can just contest the board evenly. And it's through no fault of Jason's. He just hasn't drawn a 1 or 2 drop this entire game apart from patches, which is obviously not what you want. That Firefly, the first low drop that he's been able to pick up this entire game.
Yeah, I will say as well that this hand seems to be like one shadow step away from a good time because just of the power of JasonZhou going against a Dragon Highlander, which is way more minion focused. The Vile Spines kind of come into their own again, as opposed to not like your main Highlander list, which the minions are more of a side effect as opposed to the main point of the deck.
Muzzy looking composed. Doesn't look like anything is getting on top of him just yet, but the pressure has to be being felt by these two players, but neither
100%.
of them showing so far.
Yeah, I think the difference when we talk about either nerves or pressure feeling on stage, it's less whether it exists or not, but how players deal with it, right, is the way forward.
I just realized we're approaching dangerous territory, Raven. I made a solemn promise to Muzzy that I would never accuse him of being nervous or choking ever again, and we're getting very, very close. I think we should divert back to the game as soon as possible.
I didn't name any names.
Okay.
There's the Dustbreaker though. Huge pickup there for Muzzy. Able to just clear off this board. As you said, the threats weren't exactly coming thick and fast anyway from JasonZhou. And now Muzzy has that clear. And suddenly, look at the following turns here. Multiple 5-drop choices. The Geist for the 6-drop. But there is that Shadow Step and still the second Vile Spine. Both these hands kind of seemed a little bit quiet early on. And now they're both looking very, very strong.
Right. Bone Mare as well being available. Now the coin has been used by Muzzy. He was forced to there, essentially, to coin out the Dustbreaker to relieve the pressure. Now the coin has been used. Jason would get a free turn of Bone Mare before it can interact with Shadow Reaper Anduin if it were in hand for Muzzy. But with the Draconid Operative coming down, it's more likely we're going to see a play with that second Vile Spine instead.
Yeah, and Jason not running coins in his Rogue. I think there's quite the discussion going on in the Hearthstone scene as a whole as to how good 1 or 2 or 0 coins are. Counterfeit coins, of course, not just the coin, in Rogue. And it allows you to get Bone Mare out early. But also, we've seen games this tournament where drawing the coin when you need literally any other card in your deck is very bad because it effectively does nothing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think we saw Muzzy specifically have a huge blowout with a counterfeit coin turn where it's incredibly powerful. Rage actually tweeted, like, wow, coin in that deck seems good. I wonder where he got that from, because it was actually Rage himself,
who created counterfeit coin.
The deck innovator who recommended that Muzzy put counterfeit coin in his Rogue. And Rage has a little bit of history when it comes to influencing the decisions of Hearthstone World Championship competitors when it comes to deck building.
I feel like it's kind of, what's the guy's name? I don't want this to come across as an insult, but in Lord of the Rings, you know the King of Rohan? No?
You lost me.
Oh.
I'm not a Lord of the Rings fan.
I'm sure guys in the crowd will know. The king has an advisor who always is advising them what to do, and it's like corrupting them. I feel like that's Rage.
Literally books and films about dudes walking. I can't get down with it.
Dudes walking! Wow. Okay. Saul doesn't appreciate a fine story, well told. But I appreciate Vile Spines coming down, because it's one of the strongest cards in Rogue at the moment. It enables just insane swing turns. There's no Dragonfire available at the moment, but is this a Scream turn? Is it enough of a threat? Because the attacks on board aren't really that high, but the minions on board are scary. Like I said, one Shadow Step, and guess what? The next minion you play is pointless as well.
Right. And also, Scream has the added benefit of meaning Bone Mare doesn't land on a minion that essentially has charge and pushes through extra damage. Like, you can survive this board without Screaming it, you're going to struggle to survive something like a Bone Mare followed up by a Leroy Jenkins or a South Sea Deckhand combination with Shadow Step, for example. So like those kind of combinations of 2 to 3 cards you will die to if you leave this board up. And that's a calculation that Muzzy will probably be going through right now. How likely is he to have that amount of damage?
Yeah, and it's not like Jason's hand size is small, right? You know, he's actually got plenty of cards, and there's plenty of those high impact cards that Muzzy's not seen yet. Is he looking at a cheeky Leroy from the operative into a Spirit Lash?
Right, I was about to suggest this alternative because just Spirit Lash alone would pretty much get him out of range of 2-turn lethal setups. So I looked at the Spirit Lash, and then as I looked down at it, I was like, wow, that pairs very nicely with that Leroy Jenkins that he picked up. So yeah, it's a great recognition from Muzzy, and this is something that I was actually incredibly impressed by watching Zump when he won DreamHack recently, which is stretching out the removal options that he did have as long as possible. He was doing it primarily with a custom-built Warlock deck that was built for that purpose. You just put annoying taunts in the way every single turn, and it made your Twisting Nethers and so on so much more powerful because you never had to use them. You could always just put annoying taunts in the way and make your opponents commit more. But that's a very similar mentality that you need to master to become strong at any control deck. You need to find other turns that are not using your premium removal so that your premium removal gets stretched further into the match.
Yeah, and also just the threat of that removal exists throughout the whole game. You can't just say, oh, you cast Nether. Great, I don't have to think about that anymore. I can just splurge everything onto the board. Another Dust Break here from Muzzy. He did get the first one off the Nether Spite, which is why he had to use the coin early on. Second one not going to do quite as good a job clearing up this board. I think Muzzy's still got a long way to go here. He has, you know, none of the big effect cards in his hand. There's no Raza, no Anduin, and you
no Kazakus.
Yeah, that's what you. It's like, okay, imagine you clear the board, or if you scream this turn. Oh, okay, next turn can be Operative, Small Minion, or Geist, and you're just like, what does that really do? We'll say though, Muzzy is playing 1 Cold Blood. So Geist will do something.
Muzzy's playing the Priest.
Oh. It's when I look at the wrong deck. Well, I mean, he is playing 1 Cold Blood, but Geist will not do something versus his own Cold Blood.
Yeah, right.
I'm allowed 1 slip. My one for the
That's
day.
your one?
Yeah,
All right, we'll keep track of this, ladies and gentlemen.
1. Just like we keep track of your prediction for the rest of the tournament.
The point of those roll predictions is to be spectacularly wrong, right? I mean, come on.
Looking good so far for mine.
You're looking minted, yeah.
Okay, so here's the clean up here. JasonZhou presents a strange array of threats with the 5-5 there, but it is enough, and these Bone Mares are still very, very scary, and Muzzy must be at the point now of thinking anything that's left on the board is going to be Bone Mare the following turn.
Right.
This late into the game, it's almost an expectation. Maybe not having 2 Bone Mares, but you guess at 1.
That far left card has been in Jason's hand since turn 3. And just hasn't been played yet in any situation. So yeah, there is a good chance that it's a Bone Mare. And even if there's been spots where Bone Mare could have come down, Muzzy can still respect that card as being a Bone Mare because Bone Mare is a card Jason would hold in fear of Shadow Reaper Anduin. So it's kind of a I know that you know situation where your read does not get ruled out because he didn't play a Bone Mare, because you know it's actually a pretty good play to hold back a Bone Mare until you can, almost the last possible opportunity where you're kind of forced into using it.
Yeah, and it does line up very nicely versus this Priest defeat because Priest is such a good card because it's so difficult to get rid of a lot of the time. The attack is just about right as 3, and the 6 health is really huge, but Saronite clearing that off. Jason still piling on the pressure here, and Muzzy just hasn't got a lot going on.
Minor note, there's always something that casters and players always debate about, but Jason with double Bone Mare in his hand there chose to use the one he drew later on, I believe around turn 6, kept the one that he's had since turn 3 in his hand. And there are implications of that from a hand reading perspective as to which card gives your opponent more information, which they have a kind of read on what it is, what they have no information on whatsoever. I would have liked him to use the Bone Mare from the far left.
Yeah, I do feel going the other way.
Go ahead.
There is something that we do quite often is make the presumption that the players know exactly how long each card has been in hand. Because, yes, players definitely hand track. That 100% happens, especially at this level of World Championship. if you look away for a second and the card is played, you can just miss that, and then your whole hand tracking's gone out the window.
Counterpoint again, Raven.
Oh.
We have heard the likes of Muzzy, Chucky, for example, communicating during Trinity Series. And that group, that kind of whole practice group, are the best hand trackers I have heard in Hearthstone. They make reads with incredible accuracy. So I think if you're going to give anyone credit for having information on your hand, Muzzy would be very high on that list.
Counterpoint to that.
Go ahead.
Let's get back to the game.
All right, fair enough.
Vela's going to come down with the Holy Smite. It's going to help clear up this deck hand. And a little bit safer now because Velen is not just a card you can leave unless you have, actually just have lethal that turn through it. As this 4 heal every turn is an absolute nightmare to deal with. We'll say though, Muzzy, in running the Dragon Highlander, doesn't have the extra healing tools that often used, like Binding Heal, for example, to heal for an absurd amount with Velen.
Call me crazy.
You are crazy.
I was about to say, I think you leave this Velen alive, and that is the play Jason's going to make. Shadow Step Bone Mare, drop the Scale Bane. It costs you 7 damage just to sink into this Velen. It costs you your entire board. Muzzy has no cards in hand, essentially. He's on a very low hand size, which means at most of the time he's only able to heal for 4 with this Velen, and then by developing all these extra threats, you put yourself in a position where you're setting up lethal again. This is a very similar situation to what we saw last game with Jason recognizing the Savage Roar timing. He's now spotting with these aggro decks those 2-turn lethal setups, and this is key to his victory.
And as I was saying, there's no Binding Heal in this deck, and there's no Lyra. There is literally 1 Greater Healing Potion to heal that's left, and that's it. So it's okay if you've got Greater Healing, I'll trade next turn and play the long game. If you haven't, I win. So like you said, very good recognition there. And knowing that this Dragon Highlander does have a good amount of weaknesses to itself, just as well as having some extra strengths.
The Kazakus was a huge draw for Muzzy, though, to get such a powerful removal tool. Goes for the 1-mana option, gets a 6 damage removal to take care of this Bone Mare, of course, doubled by Velen. Buffs up his board to make that Velen pretty much unremovable now. Is forced to heal his own face up to 12, but a Leroy draw still ends the game for JasonZhou, and that is the Leroy. Call that a top deck if you want, but he deserves it. He set that up with the play of leaving Velen alive, which is a brave play. Leroy rewarding Jason's decision to turn the switch and be much more aggressive than we saw in the previous days.
Yeah, it was actually kind of insane. We've seen, as you said, we've seen twice now JasonZhou just see the Matrix almost and just be like, okay. And these are not plays that you would do on average, right? On average, it's correct to kill Velen if a priest just drops it. But with knowing the deck list, with knowing the way the deck works and how to approach the actual matchup and finish the game out, JasonZhou does it. Muzzy goes 0-2 down. He is still on his way to becoming the next world champion, which is a title he would much prefer compared to the one someone else gave him.
When I first was called a choke artist, it was pretty annoying.
We know how good a player he is. The only thing holding Muzzy back historically has been Muzzy. Muzzy has a bit of a reputation as a choke artist.
It affected me a bit, I would say. It made me feel bad about how others saw my image as a player.
He's a very good player. He does tend to get nervous a lot, and when the spotlight is on him, he chokes at times.
It definitely wanted to prove to other people that I wasn't a choke artist, that I don't crumble underneath the pressure that other people believed me to do, and that showed in the final as I ended up crushing everyone.
Muzzy with a 3-0 sweep, the first player from America's Spring to go to Shanghai, China.
So being able to get that off my back in qualifying and getting first place and taking a jab back at Sottle really felt good.
All I can say is, did I choke that time, Sottle?
Deserved. No, I take it. I apologize straight away, and I solemnly swear I will never dare to refer to you as a choke artist again. Well done.
I think the choke artist thing's gone already. I mean, I have been one of the best players in the game for a very long time.
Can't argue that. He has been one of the best players for a very long time. He is 0-2 down, though. And some guy with a ponytail kept calling him a choke artist.
Who was that moron? Guys, when you make as many controversial statements as I do, sometimes you're going to look like an idiot. It happens. Muzzy's a fantastic player. But the greater point here is that he is up against it again. He's 0-2 down. Jason is playing great, and he has a massive obstacle to overcome to reverse this and get back on track to be world champion.
And if Muzzy loses, it could all be your fault.
Raven, please. Please.
Nope.
All
JasonZhou going for the Warlock this time. The only deck he has left to get a win with. Muzzy locking Priest in once again. Has some early tools, this Holy Smite and this Thanos to, you know, sort of push back versus any early push versus JasonZhou, but there isn't much of an early push, as he's playing the control version of the Warlock. This isn't cubes, where you can just go quite aggressive, to be honest, in a matchup like this, and just say, well, my Doom Guards and my other minions, and just cube what I can and start punching face. This is a very slow deck that I would say Muzzy is mainly the aggressor here by far.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at the spread of the matchups available between the two lineups as a whole, this is the most one-sided matchup of any possible encounter between two decks. Muzzy is massively favored in this encounter as a Priest.
See if it works out for them. The Geist being in hand is pretty nice in terms of just locking out Dark Pact, locking out Mortal Coil, for example, but the Dark Pact is how you cheat the mana effectively in this deck and accelerate it out. But without those, it could be a little bit tricky, as there's no Lackey to combo with yet for JasonZhou.
He's going to rip it. Does get the Velen, but the Velen sticks, and that is not good news.
And there's the Shadow Word Horror as well that can just bypass this rat.
Yep.
And oh no, your Thanos dies. Here are some of the cards that actually stick out a little bit. The Skulking Geist is pretty key to deal with, you know, Jade Druid, deal with Priest to a large extent, just remove any kind of those high burst combos. And the Swamp Ooze isn't, considering legendary weapons were introduced, Ooze has not had as high an impact as everyone thought it would.
Very true. It is very true, yeah. But the Geist is the big smart pick here, because as we see, Jason is leaving Priest up. Now, Geist can be a bit of a hard sell if it's only really aiming at Jade Druid in the meta, because you don't know how much Jade Druid there's going to be. You know there's going to be a ton of Priests. So if you can hit Jade Druid and the guarantee of all the Priests that you're coming up against that you're leaving up, remove all those one-mana spells to really reduce their burst damage, then suddenly Skulking Geist becomes a much more solid pick.
He is going to go with Horror, okay. For a second I was like, what's going on? He's going to Horror and just get the 7 damage in, and he's just going to try and end this game as quickly as possible and cash in on this Dirty Rat. I was going to mention earlier, the Spellstones being in JasonZhou's hand are really nice, because what the Highlander Dragon version does is put big dudes in the way, but those Spellstones are insane for just, you know, 4 mana deal with one almost, especially with the Librarian early on.
And it's great timing that you bring them up, because Muzzy putting Power Word Shield on his Prophet Velen and then spending his coin actually played around the 7 removal from the Spellstone, if that was possible, with a Librarian coming down, buffing it up again, and then removing the Prophet Velen. So Muzzy recognizes that this individual 7/7 can carry him to victory here, and just went all in on it that turn with the Power Word Shield.
Yeah, we were talking about win rates of archetypes, classes, and decks early on this morning, but Muzzy 1 and 4 with Priest.
Jason, hello. Are you hiding?
Just in the shifty eyes, just creep up above the monitor. Would you do something like that and just look at your opponent, like line it up so it's literally just your eyes over it? That'd be fun.
I did. I mean, whenever I did have a head-to-head encounter when I played on the main stage of DreamHacks, for example, I love that like heads-up play. I love like trying to get into the head of my opponent, just staring him down. One of the most fun experiences I've ever had was a game against Ecop, where we were just both at the same. We both kind of like trolling our opponent and trying to just, you know, put our opponent off their game plan. And neither of us really backed down in that situation. So it's a ton of fun, but it's not something we've been seeing a great deal of from the players in this tournament compared to, let's say, Pavel, who was giving his opponent the eyes constantly. But crucially, Muzzy's Power Word Shield play, trying to get that extra health on the Velen that I was talking about, the Spellbreaker was able to take that away, and then the Spellstone following it up was able to take care of it. Now, this does not look pretty for Jason by any means still, but with Velen gone, if he can somehow stabilize and then use Gul'dan to pull himself back up towards that 30 health total, it becomes very difficult for Muzzy to burst him down over 1 or 2 turns now.
Unless he gives himself 2 turns in a row.
Can we get a Brian Kibler check on whether Temporis is good in this matchup, please?
Oh, imagine if, like, the camera just pops up and we have just got Kibler in the corner and we're like, wait, what? We weren't expecting this to happen. I mean, Nozdormu, though, put some pressure on him. This might be stretching a little bit, but sometimes with all the death rattle animations and things, Nozdormu can get a little bit tricky for certain decks to deal with. Priest as much as Warlock, to be honest.
Hellfire leaves a 1-2-3 here. Jason is putting this together piece by piece.
But Nozdormu.
Serious business, Raven.
Yeah.
If
Nozdormu is serious business.
Jason overcomes the odds of a Prophet Velen just being pulled by Rat and sticking to the board.
We'll see tons of people just play Dirty Round Ladder. Oh, I've actually broken Soul. Okay, solo cast for the rest of this. So Geist is going to be played, and just remove any of the 1 spells that were left. I believe it was 1 Coil and 1 Dark Pact in the deck. And just in time as well, because there's the Lackey. JasonZhou actually had to use the Dark Pact earlier on the Spellbreaker, just to heal up to try and get out of range of this Velen push that happened earlier.
And again, Spellstone number 2, now just going to restabilize again. Jason is very much looking like he might have turned the corner here. There's more heal from the Mistress. There's a Void Lord coming next turn, and then it's just a matter of Gul'dan slowly increasing his health into increments that Muzzy won't be able to burst him down from. This is huge for Jason.
It really is. The Twisted Nether as the safety net, right, is absolutely amazing here. No matter what kind of pressure is dropped down, as you said, Gul'dan will now, because of the timing for the Void Lord, will actually give him some safety, and then worst case, he can just bash Nether hero power, and then what does Muzzy really do? Especially at the point he's at. I did just double check. Muzzy is playing Anduin. Not really seen it too much this series, but it is there.
And the dilemma that Muzzy finds himself in is accentuated by the fact that he is running the Dragon version. The Dragon version is classically able to generate less burst than the pure Highlander version because, you know, there's just more minions packed in the deck over individual spells that you can use to refresh your hero power cheaply. You rely on a bit of minion presence to beat your opponent up sometimes. And
the exact benefit of dragons, right? Is that they're kind of just big and annoying to deal with.
Muzzy has to go fishing. He's so low on resources here. He needs that power card. He needs that Anduin. He needs to start the pressure because every turn that passes from this point, Jason is just going to be able to heal up and get further and further and further out of range.
Yeah, there isn't even a lot left to particularly combo with Anduin at this point. There's the Shadow Visions, the Silence, Novice Engineer. Outside of that, everything starts getting a little bit expensive. Right. To be honest, to get any real form of damage, considering your opponent's going to negate 3 of your damage every single turn.
We are focusing a lot on the negatives for Muzzy, but there are several positives. Primarily, Jason does not really have much healing left in his deck apart from the Blood Reaver Gul'dan hero power, which Muzzy can still outpace the Blood Reaver Gul'dan hero power, don't get me wrong. It's just going to make it a much slower process. But for example, the Dark Pact has gone from JasonZhou's deck. He has that Siphon Soul in his hand, no more remaining in his deck, and then he has a Mistress remaining as well. That's all of his healing that he can pile up on top of this Gul'dan hero power. But now you just see it. Every turn, he's just free to gain 3 more. Just pull himself further and further out of range. That's a card that you cannot play with Shadow Reaper Anduin anymore. That's 2 more damage he has healed by pulling it out of his hand. These are all small increments, but they're adding up, and it's all going one way at the moment.
Yeah, and it's way more impactful at this stage in the game with the health differences to actually kill a minion with that hero power instead of doing 3 to face, right? Like, the 3 to face doesn't matter this turn. You'd rather just stack something on the board. Also, the Nazar isn't the flashiest card in the world in this deck, because you've mainly got the Lackeys and the Void Lords and the Mistresses, which I guess can impact health totals as well. But it's just a fact of more stuff, right? And Muzzy's running out of stuff very, very quickly. I think Kazakus, as well as Anduin, might be the answers here.
Right.
Kazakus can generate that value, can generate that cheap and extra damage from Anduin.
I believe absolutely nothing was destroyed by that, guys.
Because Geist has already been playing. Fine, Muzzy. Imagine if Geist only affected your opponent. That card would be insane.
Brutal. Yeah, it'd be so savage.
You'd probably put it in every deck. One thing Muzzy did have for a moment there was time, right? He's not been pressured in any way. Already on 17. If the board even gets acknowledged and cleared at any point, Jason can create a pretty reasonable amount of damage just with the Nazoth and the hero power over a couple of turns. So he can catch that back up after this great healing potion very, very quickly indeed. 8 cards left for Muzzy. There's about three he wants to draw.
Yeah, I mean, the other big tool
to draw, should I say.
the other big tool that he's been missing this entire game as well is Psychic Scream. He just hasn't been able to relieve any of this pressure to buy himself more time, and Draconid Operative is actually kind of a big whiff with no dragon in hand to activate it.
Just like Dustbreaker would have been as well. Like you could, well, Dustbreaker doesn't really kill much, but it can do something and maybe set up the Dragonfire Potion. Doesn't matter, you're not got another dragon. That's what you get.
I must consider.
Struggling to piece together a series of draws now, because we were talking about the problems Muzzy has in terms of what he has available like 2-3 turns ago.
Yep.
And every turn that he doesn't get what he needs, it gets progressively worse. It actually increases in problems as opposed to it stays even.
And now he's just having to spend more and more resources to stay alive so that he has time to draw that Shadowy Panduin, that Kazakus, that Psychic Scream that he needs. For every card that he plays in a defensive manner suddenly effectively heals JasonZhou for 2 more.
And any kind of, even equal healing, like Mistress of Mixtures, for example, that actually benefits Jason.
Oh, massive.
Like, even though the heal is the same, it benefits Jason in the long run 100% of the time. And these minions are just too big to deal with now, even with 1 Voidlord Silence. There's Dustbreaker. But does it even matter at this point? It doesn't! JasonZhou is going to be moving on, and Muzzy is going to be knocked out. JasonZhou keeping China hopes alive.
Very, very important for China as a region. I think a Chinese world champion would perhaps have a bigger impact to the respective region than any other available. But at the same time, your heart does have to go out to Muzzy. He is truly a top 5 player in the world, like almost without argument, arguably the very, very best. Sometimes in Hearthstone, it's just not your day. But honestly, JasonZhou played fantastic that whole series and deserves everything he got.
Yeah, Europe and the Americas region suffering in Group B as JasonZhou is the runner-up and will be moving on. So let's hear from him as he's with TJ.
Thanks very much, guys. Joined by JasonZhou after his victory, and that's a big one for you. Muzzy considered a favorite by a lot of people, a lot of players and fans alike. How does it feel to start off the day and the weekend with a 3-0 over him?
I know Muzzy like 2 years ago. Like at that time, I was always playing on US serve. He always can hit like legendary top 10. I'm too like, so we know each other like 2 years ago and become friends at that time. I know he plays really good. And today, my lineup against him just maybe just a 50-50. So the first match he played against me, he win. So now we are equal.
That's right. Not another chance for another rematch, though, so you'll have to take this one. But this is sort of similar to what happened last year. Last year, you were at the World Championship. You made it to the top 4. Are the feelings right now similar to where you were last year, or does this stage feel any different to you?
Yeah, this year my target is to at least top 4. Before come here, I told Omega Zero we are like 2 Chinese players only, so maybe we should try hard to get at least top 4. Then when I go back to China, at least when fans ask me like, okay, we got top 4 and our region is not very behind.
The Chinese fans have been, pretty adamant about wanting more success this year. Your next opponent later on today is going to be Doc Pone. How are you feeling going into that matchup?
I would say still 50-50. I watched his game yesterday, and his lineup, I think it's mostly same lineup, and but yesterday he got a very good RNG, and but today I'm not bad too. So let's see.
All right, well, let's see. One more round of applause for JasonZhou after his victory. Moving on to the quarterfinals. And with that, let's send it over to Frodan and Kibler.
JasonZhou takes down Muzzy.